always, it's good to see family and friends of the CX network grow every lunch and learn. It's always a different, unique combination of people, which is always very fun to host and get to learn. Please feel free to interact either in chat or if very appropriately off mute. We're really excited to have this program. We are very excited to start off with Brian and Tanya.
All right, thanks for handing it off, Charlotte. So here we go. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm fortunate to be speaking with Tanya Judkins today. She's the Acting Director of Diversity and Inclusion at USDA. Tanya and I first met at USDA, and I quickly became a fan. When she was Chief of Staff to the CIO, she was critical to the success of the GSA Centers of Excellence. Just her knowledge of the department, her collaborative leadership style, and her sense of humor was, essential to getting things done and having fun. She's currently, as I mentioned, she's currently the Acting Director of Diversity and Inclusion at USDA, and she's here today to share what she's been working on, some of the lessons learned, and what could be done to improve DEIA across the federal government. We have a lot of content to cover today. We'll probably only have time for 1 to 2 questions after each speaker, not just Tanya, but please stay for the networking half an hour to ask some more in-depth questions. So with that said, welcome, Tanya.
Hey, thanks, Brian. And it's so great to see everybody and be in this nice, comfortable atmosphere. So I'm really excited about that. But yeah, so I guess, do you want me to get started or you want to get started?
Yeah, tell us a little bit about your role. What have you been up to?
Oh, absolutely. So I have been in this role for about 6 months now. So I'm leading the diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility for USDA. This is actually very exciting for me. So those that know me, I'm all about the employee and really about culture. That's what my background is in. And so I was really excited to have this opportunity to lead this effort. Just a little bit of background. I guess you guys know that, in June 25th, that President Biden signed the executive order for diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility in the workplace. And so we really hit the ground running with that to make sure that we were doing everything that we can on our part within USDA. So for this conversation, I'll be talking about USDA, but then talking as a whole in terms of DEIA as a whole. So I'll switch back and forth. So some of the things that we had to do out the gate was that we had to do an assessment. All the federal government agencies had assessments to do. We had to do a departmental assessment that basically talked about where we saw ourselves. There was a questionnaire. It talked about how we viewed ourselves across the department in terms of our culture, how our employees are being treated, just different things that we had in place. And then our mission areas also had to do the same. They had to do self-assessments. And so we did submit that back to OPM, and then we did receive their feedback as well. Now, one of the largest things that I'm working on and that I will complete before my detail is up is that we are on schedule to complete a DEIA strategic plan, which is due on March 23rd of this year. So that is in the federal world, if you're thinking about DEIA, that is what we're doing right now. So all agencies should be working on their strategic plan. For USDA, we did not have a DEIA strategic plan. Our plan focused more on diversity and inclusion without the equity and the accessibility piece. So a lot of times people think that it's the same, but it's not. It's definitely taking the culture piece and bringing it in, as well as the accessibility piece to make sure that there's equity across the board. So from a USDA standpoint, and even from, and across the federal government on some of the working groups I've been on, we look at equity as there's internal equity, which is DEIA, and then there's external equity, which is the larger equity as a whole. So that's how we break it up. So for the sake of this conversation, I'm talking about internal to the workforce.
Just for those that don't know, Tanya, I know that this executive order came out, and all the agencies really had to adhere to it and take action. But could you speak to the sheer size of USDA and how doing this here is not like doing it at some of the others?
Yeah, I mean, we have, it's really interesting, and I learn more and more on every position that I'm in, but we have over 110,000 employees across the world. We also have employees in every state. We have state directors. We have, so it's amazing that when we talk about DEIA, and it's no secret that right now we are making sure that we're really taking a stance. And so what I mean by that is that we're making sure that we're very deliberate in terms of how we're looking at our workforce. I mean, I know just telework alone, right? You don't want to get into all that, but just telework alone, our secretary came back and was like, all right, look, we're going to make sure that we have our policies in place that our employees can even telework. Even that right there alone was a benefit for our employees. But yes, so Brian, we have our state directors, which are across in all the states. We have also our employee resources groups, which we did revitalize them. And so now they're more active into our decision-making. And then not to mention, we have our mission areas and our agencies, and they all operate differently within USDA. So as we're developing our plan, we want to ensure that it's not a national capital region focus, that it's USDA as a whole.
So I'm sure it took quite a bit of time to collect all of this information from so many different parts of the states, but just so many different segments of the department. Based on what you've seen so far, are there any sort of lessons learned, any organizations that you want to highlight that have been doing a great job, or just something that you've taken away from this experience so far?
Yeah, I will tell you that, from what I've learned, the mission areas and the agencies, they continue the work. A lot of times we think of where DEIA should sit. And I think that it shouldn't be looked at where it necessarily sits. It's a collaborative effort across any federal agency. So you're going to have to work with civil rights, your CHICOs, your budget officer, procurement. This is an effort that you have to work with absolutely everyone. So I will tell you that within civil rights and the HR community, that's where we started. That's where I started. That's where we started really communicating to see what is it that we've already started doing, what's already being done. We know out in the mission areas with the Forest Service, also with AMS, there's different, and I'll get that acronym for you, I apologize about that. But there's different agencies that are already doing the work that's saying, hey, we're gonna bring on maybe a chief diversity officer or a representative that will be representative in the mission areas. Now, again, because they all operate sometimes differently, sometimes they're all on different levels. So one of the things that we want to make sure of is that I did set up a few working groups, one being like our DEIA executive order representatives, and those were with our general counsel and our HR representatives, our LGBTQ+I leads, gender leads, equity leads, partners of public engagement, so we can make sure those internships are good. I mean, so this is truly a collaborative effort. And then we also have another working group where it's what I would call all of our DEIA subject matter experts. So these are the people that were already working in the field of diversity and inclusion. It was super important for us to have them come with us in the very beginning and lean in. So then at that point, we would be able to say, all right, when we're doing this document, this strategic plan, they would have as much information that they can put in from the very beginning, and that we weren't just asking them for it at the end. I think that as we continue to do DEIA, we have to set an example for DEIA as we're even doing our strategic plan. So that's where we are right now in terms of like those that are getting it right. I think we're all trying to do our very best, and we're trying to make sure that this is something that it is great government. It is good government. So it should not be something that is here and then it's gone. It is something that we should be doing all along, no matter what it's called.
And, you know, in regards to culture, has there been a focus on a culture shift at USDA? And if so, what might be some of the priorities?
Yeah, absolutely. Culture is huge. We want to make USDA a great place to work. And so with that being said, we have been working with our CX team, and we've designed we've had human center design meetings with our USDA leadership to cultivate trust and build relationships, and also create that visibility and transparency across the agencies. We've also reviewed and improved a lot of our EEO complaints process. I mean, just simple things like that. As I mentioned, that we reestablished our special emphasis manager in civil rights. We revitalized the employee resources groups. We issued updated anti-harassment policy memo. We launched a workplace violence working group. So there's things like this in terms of our culture that we're doing to say, not to mention within our plan, we're setting our plan up that it shows this is what our culture is. This is what means something to us. And this is what our vision is, our values are, so that, again, there's an executive order that has principles and priorities, but our strategic plan will have goals with the priorities mapped in the goals, because executive orders can and will change, as we all know. So it'll be important for us to institutionalize the great work that's happening and the vision for USDA to be a great place to work by ensuring that we embed this in all that we do.
And one of the things that is definitely taken place, and I feel like has spread across the federal government, is the role of the chief diversity officer. Now, you're currently in that role, and I assume they're taking a more you're acting in that role, and USDA will be hiring someone permanently in the role. But do you have any takes on the magnitude of the role, and or what it will take to sort of make the change that you feel needs to come from this strategic plan? I know I'm currently in a role where I'm a team of one, but what do you see as being the keys to success as it pertains to that chief diversity officer role?
Yeah, Brian, that is a great question, and it's probably still up for debate. And I say that because it is amazing on how there's still interesting conversation about the CDIO, that Chief Diversity Inclusion Officer, and like, who are they exactly? Empowering, everybody wants to know. And I say that because in talking to other federal agencies, some of their chief diversity officers are in civil rights, some might be in HR, and some may be within the agency head within, like the office of the secretary. So it's really important that each agency focuses on what's best for that particular agency. In our case, I think they're still making some decisions on terms of where they want that to sit, but they know that they want it to send a clear message on how important it is for USDA. I will also say that, the biggest thing, the focus for us is that we're going to restore the confidence of our employees and the morale among the workforce. And that also means beginning to fill those positions and building the workforce for the future. And we want USDA to be a safe and fair, rewarding workplace for all employees, and that our staff can love to come to work every day, and they can just do that important work that'll help them move, just to move forward. And so I think that, at the end of the day, it's really important that this particular position and role, that we're able to build and maintain a talented and diverse workforce that reflects the diversity of everyone, right? Of the department, of all the federal government, and we ensure like ample, equal opportunities for everyone. And then have that inclusive workplace that welcomes all employees and creates that psychological safe space for employees, and appreciates the difference and allows employees to respectfully be able to express themselves, and one that's culturally aware and responsive. And so I say that, all that to say that, building this leadership team that USDA is building, it's probably the most diverse that it's ever been in history for USDA. And, it's very robust. And with the trainings, the human-centered design, as I mentioned before, the ERGs, which they're so important to have. We have like over 37 employee resources groups. And, I had to kind of learn what that was, but I didn't realize that there were all these different groups representing all these different areas, and this is a one-stop shop for employees to go to. Like sometimes when they're just not sure what to do, they're there for them. So, I mean, of course, we're still striving towards being a data-driven, customer-centered, learning organization, but we really want to make sure that our employees are, valued, heard, seen, and respected. So whoever, however that position, wherever that position sits, however that goes, I'm sure that it's going to work out for, our employees as a whole.
Now, I know this wasn't necessarily one of the, prepared questions, if that's the appropriate term, but just curious, it seems like when you're speaking about the CDO role at USDA, it is focused internally on the employees, but I'm just curious if there's been any discussion around external equity or discussion around the equity between USDA and, let's say, farmers, ranchers, and producers. And if it has been discussed, and potentially, does that reside with the specific role, or is there a collaborative effort talking about it? And if not, that's fine.
No, it's okay. I mean, that's a conversation that continues to come up. I mean, so Claudette Fernandez who is leading the external equity piece. We work together side by side. So I believe at some point it's going to all come together, but for the sake of so many executive orders happening at the same time and the work that needs to be done, we've been working parallel. We've been working in parallel. But at some point, I believe that we'll have some sort of all equity, if you will. And, I guess if there was a boardroom, all the equity team members would be at the table. So hopefully that helps.
Sure does. It sure does. And I think there's some great questions that have popped up here in the chat that I'll send your way here. So you had mentioned, revitalizing the ERGs. Would you be able to speak to a little bit more in regards to what steps were taken to sort of bring those to the forefront?
Absolutely. So again, coming in on the detail and being at USDA since 2017, I did not realize that the ERGs were there. So once we started having a lot of roundtables and listening sessions, we started bringing our employee resources group in, and it's just amazing. I'm just in awe of what they do, their passion, and being able to be there for them for whatever that they need. So even with our strategic plan, I've provided that to them, like our goals, I've brought them in on that. So anything that we're having discussions on, especially if it's DEIA related or even culture related, we bring them in. So we don't bring them in last, and we make sure that they have a seat at the table. I know that that's the word that people say, but it's literally having a voice, and also being honest about what we're looking for in terms of feedback, so that they know that their feedback would be heard. So it's not, I think people need to understand that DEIA is not just about Special Emphasis Month anymore. It's like, oh, this is the month, we're going to celebrate it. That's not what that's about. It's really, truly about that equity for everyone. And adding that accessibility piece on there was huge. So we're also talking to those with disabilities and, or maybe disabilities that are not seen. I mean, so we have to think about the technical aspect of that. I mean, that's a whole nother subject within itself. But yeah, so that's how we brought them. That's how we brought them.
All right, and another great one here. Based on what you've seen so far, what are some things that you feel could be replicated for those that are starting on their DE&I journey?
I think it's important to reach out to those who are already doing it, because what I've learned is that some people have been in the EEO space. I've learned that others were not in any space. It's just that they have the leadership, they have the culture, and they just kind of know, okay, this is what we need to get things done. I don't think there's just a special book for DEIA. I think it's a passion. I think that it's commitment. And so it's just really important to have these types of sessions, to have these kind of talks, reach back out to say, hey, I'm looking for this. OPM has been outstanding. They hold office hours. So we're able to build that community. We were all just learning at the same time and asking the same questions and still trying to figure it out, sharing PDs. So it's really a sharing and a learning environment. And I think just starting out, that's what I would do. I would reach out. I would say, hey, when I first started the detail, I went on LinkedIn. That's a true statement. I went on LinkedIn. I searched for DEIA or diversity and inclusion. And I said, hi, I'm Tanya Judkins. I just started the detail and I'm looking to learn more. And so that's what I did. And so I got feedback and conversations and then built those types of relationships. So I think that it's hard work, it's messy work. And I think if you can hang in there, I think it's great because it's also rewarding. It's, it's going to take some time, but I think it's definitely rewarding.
That's amazing. I have to agree. Like LinkedIn is just my platform of choice. It's so useful in connecting and learning from others, and people are often very willing to share what they know. So that's amazing. So we have 2 minutes left, Tanya. You've seen a lot. You've seen a lot. You've done a lot. What do you want to leave us with? Is it a gem on assessments and how to get started? Is it a gem on ERGs? Yes, time went too fast, but give us something, Tanya. Your wealth of knowledge. What are you leaving us with?
Oh, wow. What am I leaving you guys with? I think this is a personal one. And so this is what I'll say, because of how I kind of got into this particular role. I will say that it's important that you have a lot of gems out there. And as you are in your positions and as you are continuing to do some really cool things, look out for those opportunities. And also look out for those that are willing to give you a chance. So that's where I'm going to leave that. And the reason why is because that's still DEIA. It's really about giving those people a chance that may need that opportunity. And it's also about looking beyond what you think and getting out of your own way and learning about others. So diversity of thought is really important. So I've learned a lot from a lot of different people. I'm so excited to be on this particular call with you guys and Charlotte and you guys. I mean, that's so exciting, but that's what I would leave. Hopefully that's helpful. More to come, hopefully in the next couple of months, and some cool things that I'll be doing, but that's what I'll do. So thanks.
Thank you, Tanya. Charlotte, take it away.
Well, before Tanya leaves, I just want to say that we were in a huge COI leadership meeting the other week, and I know Nancy was there and so was Crystal, and we spent almost all of it a lot on D&I efforts and how do we get more people to the table and all these things. And one of those things is to show up for this. So thank you. I just want to be able to kind of create that platform and bring your friends and bring them into the community. I think that a lot of times we invite people who are like ourselves, and we, neglect to realize that maybe the right people aren't bringing the right people, right? So I'm just trying to make sure that you feel free to bring along yourselves and those who you feel need a platform and a table or a seat at the table to please join us and really lead the initiative. One of the things for CX and DE&I how it collects or how it connects is that DE&I is a measure of CX success in government. And that we can't measure success on how well we're doing service delivery for our residents or recipients if DE&I is not the forefront of the thought. So thank you so much for sharing your insights. And now I guess it's up to Victor and I. Hi, Victor.
Hello.
Hi. Sorry, is this view working for us? Okay. All right. Hi, Victor. This man needs his own introduction, so I'm going to let him do that. But just the background on Victor is that I saw him speak at a different conference on civic design. And he had so many amazing, passionate things to say about trauma-informed design, which I was like completely blown by. And I make fun of him that he is the one to bring all of us to tears when he feels like it. So he's very powerful in his words and his speech and his passions. I'm really excited to have him and loop him into the CX COI in this way. So Victor, do you want to do an intro? Tell us about yourself.
Yeah. I'll try a short one. I'm currently serving as the Chief Experience Officer and Service Design Lead in the NASA SBIR SCTR program. Stands for Small Business Innovation Research and Small Business Technology Transfer Program, where we work with both small businesses and small businesses in collaboration with research institutions, often universities, to advance NASA's technological needs, as well as develop the economy across the United States. Previously, I was at 18F, and I came from the private sector before that.
And so you know Brian from your 18F days and Tanya from COEs and all those things. Awesome.
I do. I know Crystal too.
And Crystal. Do we have any other fellow GSA 18Fers in here? Speak up. Okay, so one of the things that we talked about and Tanya kind of brushed on was this idea that diversity is everyone's job. We say that all the time for CX and ethics and all these things that we want to relegate into this role, but truly it's everybody's job. Can you tell us about what you think in your perspective warrants that and how people get involved?
Yeah, so there's a strange unintended consequence, I think, that happens when you hire someone for diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, justice. It creates sometimes this implicit understanding that work, that JEDI accessibility work, is that person's job. Instead of, oh, this is actually my job, this is something that I should do as well. So I've seen in places where diversity is not going well, it's not very inclusive, it's not very equitable, and we hire someone in to do that work, and people don't think about how to do it themselves because someone else has got that. And then leadership feels really good because they did their job. They hired someone or they put someone in a detail and they let it go. I've seen it work really well when we don't actually have a person hired. Usually the organizations, I think, that have really good diversity and equity, inclusion and justice and accessibility they often don't have that role because it's just infused into everything we do. So I was in an organization once where it was when we lifted it up to be an OKR, an objective and key result, for like organization wide, and that everyone was being evaluated on that. It was part of your own performance plan. So everyone had to contribute it, that it became something that we can make advancement on. But prior to that, for instance, I was at this multinational corporation, which I won't name, but it's well known and some people think it's a monopoly. And we started this program where we would take engineers and they would take a quote unquote semester off and partner with an HBCU and teach the redesign and teach the introduction to computer science course. And then in the next semester, maybe the spring semester, they would run events and hackathons and resume writing and things. And the goal was that we would increase, or actually at that point we didn't have any. So we would increase, but we would start having interns in our organization from HBCUs because we hadn't had any before, and we did a lot of biased recruiting. So what would happen is you go do this program, you do a semester, you teach, and let's say now you're back in your job. Let's say you're working on the maps. We have a maps program. So you're working on the maps and you're still doing a few events in the spring to get students excited and applying. And now you're coming up for your annual review and your manager says, okay, you get a 3, let's say meets expectations. And you're like, what? Everybody else on the team got 4s that they surpassed it. I thought I was doing a really good job. I said, yeah, you did a good job, but you only did a good job for half the year. I don't know how to evaluate that thing that you did at that HBCU. That doesn't help me, it doesn't help MAPS. And so it created this disincentive and people didn't want to participate in those types of things because they weren't evaluated for it. So when we raise it up to the level of something we're actually evaluating you on and everyone needs to contribute it, it actually changes how we do the work. And so in my organization, I'm lucky that we haven't chosen the expert approach. And there's nothing wrong with an expert approach as long as the expert or the person you hire is merely a facilitator or coordinator of work that everyone is doing. We just have it embedded in all that we do.
Right. And I want to divert a teeny second because it's operationalizing DE&I, which we are all very interested in. And you're talking about metrics. And I know we're going to talk about it later, but you brought it up. So can we talk a little bit about metrics and measuring DE&I? Like, I think that's so fascinating. It's something that I brought up to the COI collaboration. I was like, well, if we can't do it like cognitive, can we do it like objectively, put numbers to this? And can you tell us about how you might do that? And for everybody on the call too.
Yeah, I don't know. You measure what you care about. So if you care about it, you need to measure it, right? You need to put resources behind it. You need to, not because you're in love with measuring for measuring's sake, but you just need to know if what you're doing, the initiatives, the tasks, the activities are leading to the goal that you want. So I'll give you an example unrelated to DE&I. I was doing a project for the National Institutes of Health. We were working on their flagship product. It's the world's largest biomedical journal citation database and search engine. And we had this situation where a tiny percentage of the user, the community base, the customers were complaining, right? Let's say it was about, I want to say 5%. And so what was happening, at least in the team's understanding of how you deal with that, it was ignored. We ignored those complaints and those issues because it was such a tiny percent. We were doing so well overall. But when we did a process of understanding who we are, creating a product vision, product mission, strategy, all of that, we realized that part of our strategy involves targeted customers, right? And one of the targets for that journal database was medical librarians. It was a target. So instead of looking at the complaints coming from 5% of the community, we had to ask ourselves, what percentage of librarians, medical librarians were complaining? What percentage of this target group? What percentage of that target group? And then we realized, well, all these specific complaints were coming from 80% of those medical librarians. And because they are a target group, that matters, even if that only represents 5% of the entire customer base. So in the same way, we in my program, we have specific targets. We were specifically looking to increase the representation of women-owned, minority-owned, veteran-owned, and service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses. If we want to do that, we have to set targets and try to do activities or tasks or initiatives that influence those targets. On the SCTR side, the program where we help give support, financial and otherwise, to collaborations between small businesses and research institutions, we're specifically looking to increase the representation of HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, TCUs, tribal colleges and universities, Native American non-tribal universities, HSIs, Hispanic serving institutions, Hawaii Native, Alaska Native institutions, Asian American Pacific Islander institutions, and women's colleges. Did I say that? Hispanic serving institutions. So all of those groups, we're trying to increase their participation. So yeah, we have, in addition to technical goals, we have these mission goals, and they're part of our strategy, and we are trying to affect them. So we actually do work on that, and we have goals and targets.
So there's these missions for you to accomplish these goals, but then the greater mission is actually agency-wide and actually for the greater good of American innovation, right? So SBIRs and STTRs, for those who are not familiar, are ways that we give out grants for innovation and bright new ideas that could be, and you were kind of describing this, of how it gets enveloped into the NASA innovation pipeline, right? So you identify these people. And one of the things that you said that was so compelling was this idea that like, there's this myth that, selection should be blind for the best technology. But really, if we don't have the selection variety or the diversity, then we're really cheating ourselves out of the potential brilliance of so many groups and perspectives and ideas. So I was really fascinated by, could you tell the audience a little bit more about SBIRs and STTRs and what diversity means to innovation at NASA?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's really interesting. Like I can't take any credit really for the bias that we have towards justice and diversity and equity and inclusion. It was built into our program. So we were doing this work before the executive order came out that Tanya talked about. This is built into the mission of SBIR that came from policy with Congress and SBA, that we are trying to accelerate or at least mature technology along the TRL pipeline. TRL is technology readiness level. So if you're not familiar with that, let's say a 1 is basic research. I don't know if this will work. I don't know who could use it or what we could do with it. Whereas a 9 would be, it is ready to be deployed tomorrow. So for us, deployment might mean it's ready to be put on a space shuttle tomorrow or some particular mission, NASA mission tomorrow. So our job is to kind of increase those technologies and move them across the TRL with hopefully 2 ultimate goals. 1, infusion into a NASA mission. So we actually benefit from that and use that, and NASA program manager takes that on and it gets into a mission. Or 2, commercialization. So a private investor says, "Ooh, I like what's going on there. Let me invest in it and then commercialize it." And so NASA has a history of technologies that show up today in our sunglasses and our cell phones and our laptops and bungee jumping cords, et cetera. So a lot of things that began with research for space applications have found other applications in the world. And so there is an economic development lens, and we have a bias specifically towards small businesses, since most of the dollars that leave the government through government contracts go to large businesses. So that's kind of what we do. And predominantly the universities that might work with the government or the small businesses predominantly are male or male owned, predominantly white. And so we're trying to increase representation, which is part of the whole SBIR mission. So it's built into that. And so that is a focus of what we're trying to do.
Amazing. So I just can't even put my head around it because I know the impact, the mega impact of NASA technology on just like the global technology sphere. And it starts with these minute adjustments. And we didn't talk about this before. And if you don't have an answer off the top of your head, I totally understand. But we were talking about like how you were assessing the maturity of the presentation or the submission, right? And let's say like, assuming that sometimes these built-in biases might be in the metrics themselves, right? Like if you are grading, let's say, well, what's that quote where it's like, if you measure a fish's ability to climb a tree or whatever, has there been any tweaks or modifications that happen in order to account for, historical biases in the rubric of assessing these technologies? And if not, is there programs that can help mitigate that, coach people or coach groups and organizations to get to a better placement on that rubric? Like what happens as a result of these discoveries?
Yeah, we're an interesting program because I would say I think a majority of the people who do the work of the SBIR are not necessarily employed directly by SBIR, right? So whether they're technical monitors or contracting officers or reviewers who help rate and score, we have people from across the NASA spectrum and some people outside who help us administer and run this program. We do have a team, but then there are people that we reach to outside of that. So yes, we are looking at ways that we can standardize the different ways that different interpretations of the metrics affect one person's rating versus another person's rating. And we have certain things that we do to kind of balance that out. But yeah, we're actually actively working on how to improve that. And so we're looking at various different models that come from other worlds, whether they're from academic publishing and how they might do that, various blind models, double blind models, et cetera. So yeah, we're working on that work to see if we can do that. But at the same time, remember, we're not only looking at the goal of making sure that everything that we fund had a technically amazing proposal. It should be technically amazing as well, but we also have non-technical objectives that we're trying to meet in terms of the number of proposals, et cetera, but also in terms of the diversity and equity and inclusion. So we're trying to balance all of that and making sure we still achieve the technical excellence while also achieving the justice, equity, diversity, inclusion work.
I think that this is a very sensitive topic, right? Around, you know, is it affirmative? As like, do they not deserve, do we weaken the scales, or, you know, like, would you have any personal or professional commentary on people who feel that way? Like, hey, like if we change these, you know, measures of excellence because we want to be more diverse, like, you know, are we being unfair to everyone else, right? And that's kind of the similar commentary on like affirmative action, right? Like, oh, it should just be the best ever. Do you feel like do you want to, like, people who might argue like D&I efforts feels good, but really, you know, you're setting people up to two different measures, and that's essentially unequal. But we're talking about equitable, right? So, like, is there something you want to add to that, people who might feel that way about D&I?
There's a lot of things I could say. The first is to just dispel the myth that people aren't out there. So if your issue is that I don't want to lower my technical bar in order to increase diversity, there are people out there. In our case, there are women-owned businesses that are excellent. There are minority-owned businesses that are excellent. There are veteran-owned and service-disabled-owned businesses that are excellent. So it's more a question of their awareness and their participation in the program, rather than lowering your barrier. But yes, sure, there are some groups that may need a little extra help. And so what we try to do is use a systems approach, right? So I think when you do design work, you study a problem through some type of research, you come up with ideas, and then you implement it. When you're doing systems practice, or some people might say systems thinking or system innovation or systemic design, you actually, instead of doing one quote unquote solution, you're actually not worried about a solution. You're actually trying to improve the health of a system. So in the same way, like if I give you a vaccine, the vaccine is not killing the virus in your body. It's helping your immune system to work better by recognizing when the virus enters in your body. So in the same way, we're trying to improve the whole ecosystem. And in a systems practice, you don't just do one thing or one intervention. You try to find multiple leverage points throughout the system, and you do things at multiple levels within the system. So in terms of at the point of awareness and finding people, yes, we can do work there, but you can also do work in terms of providing resources and even non-financial work to help those who have been under-resourced or underserved to get the resources that they need, have the connections that they need, get the equipment that they need so that they can do the work and at the level of excellence that you require. So you work at multiple levels of the system, but even apart from looking at all other parts of the system, the people are there, and it's just a matter of reaching out and their awareness and showing them that it's worth it, right? If you're not going to apply if you don't think, number one, you're going to get it, or you don't think you'll be given a fair chance. So how do you design your communication, and actually how do you change your practice so that it actually is fair and they have a chance?
You get like custom, like as a CX person, right? Is there like an experiential difference that you're also considering here? Like, yes, you have your back end metrics and all the things are straightened up. Has there been a different approach in the strategy and execution and even feedback of how you might have changed things for external people who are interacting with your agency or customers per se?
Yeah, so we approach, there's many different ways to do customer experience, right? So because of my background, maybe it's a bias to have, we approach it through service design. So that means we're in the middle of winding down a huge discovery to get a landscape assessment of this service and all that it is doing, all that is offering, everything that's going well, everything that is not going so well. And that service assessment includes an equity assessment. How are we doing for these various groups? So we infuse equity even in our research, both on the qualitative side and the quantitative side. We're trying to get their experience, but also trying to look at it. And then we're in the process. I'm really excited because in the future, we're going to have this visible to people, but we're building these metrics that people can actually see. There's 3 of them. One will be a customer experience metric, another will be an employee experience metric, and another will be service index. Think of it as a measure of the health of the service. So this is useful for us because then, let's say you have a service, let's say you have a customer experience metric of 5.2 out of 10, and it's really low. Then you could click it and it can disaggregate, and you could say, okay, here's the contribution to that from the small businesses, and it's at a 4.2. From the research institutions, it's at a 9.2, and then from the NASA program managers, who are considered one of our customers, and it's at a 8.9. So you realize, the lowest one is the small business, and you can click that and it can disaggregate to show you the experience score coming from the different groups. And using that information, we can then make a strategy that we feel if we focus on this particular group and improving their experience, that'll have the biggest impact on improving this customer experience metric. But all of that is tied in and things that we're working on to build a dashboard for our executive leadership so they can have data-driven decisions. So, but that works on both ends. So not just the customer experience, but from a service design perspective, we work on both the customer experience and the employee experience, because we know a good employee experience creates a better customer experience. And what people don't often say, but it's true as well, that a good customer experience actually can affect the employee experience. And then the third one, the service index, which is a measure of the health of the service, is more about how well we are meeting our goals, how well the service is functioning. So to differentiate a little bit from the experience, it could be something like, oh, it took 45 minutes to submit a proposal, right, to the SBIR program, but it felt really short. Like the customer experience was great. If it was a good experience, it felt short, but the amount of time might be something that's in our service index, 45 minutes. Whereas you could have something where it took 20 minutes to submit a proposal, but it felt super long and laborious. It was hard, and I had to go back and do the steps, and I thought it'd be shorter. So the experience was bad, but the time might have been less. So in that service index, we have a bunch of things that are related specifically to the functioning of the service and how well we're meeting our goals. Last thing I want to say is specifically, I'm pushing for us to begin to do what I call an efficacy study. So not just are we more effective at whatever it is we are doing, but is there an actual difference between someone who has a potentially NASA applicable technology? Is there a difference in their ability to commercialize that versus someone who does have a NASA applicable technology and goes through our program? And that we don't know. So combining our service design with our customer experience, but also doing a randomized controlled trial study, or really we're going through the data to see, does it make a difference to come through our program versus not? Of course, we can make it better for the people who do, but the question is there an actual difference? Because if there isn't, why do we exist? So I'm working on trying to get that study done so we can evaluate the actual efficacy and not just the effectiveness.
I think you're one of the few people, Victor, in CX world that sound in the field of like PhD in research. There's a lot of ways people get to CX, right? There's like marketing. I come from user experience design. So many paths, but you seem to have a real keen sense of like research and duplicating that efforts and the metrics of it, which I think is really the next frontier if we want to, solidify the effort that we're doing in CX. So that's really wonderful. We have 5 minutes. So if you want to start writing in questions for Victor, otherwise I'll just keep picking his brain because I think Victor is fascinating. I'm so glad all of you guys got to meet him. But I guess in the next 5 minutes, we can talk a little bit about concluding remarks. Like, what do you want people to take away? What do you want people to know about NASA? Like, what are you working on? What do you want to leave us with?
I guess just that, we call it a JEDI or a JEDI. So accessibility, justice, equity, diversity. inclusion is everything. It's cross-functional, it's cross-sectoral. So even if you say, hey, I'm a company that just builds software, we know that there are ways of building software that have more equitable outcomes or more equitable access or less equitable, right? Beautiful book, Algorithms of Oppression, you may have heard of that. So I think it's a crucial skill, not just to win contracts, but to learn how to embody and build within your organization so that when you are pitching for contracts, you are just extending what you already do internally to the work that you do externally. So learning how to actually be that and embody that is super, super helpful, and learning how to build that into everything you do, even if it doesn't seem like it's related.
I think if you and Tanya and everyone on the call got their way, we would surely see that this is not an afterthought and that we're going to get much more elevated sense of D&I importance in the experience of everyone. Brian asked for a CX resource or D&I resource, and you dropped one. One was called Algorithms of, what? What was it?
Algorithms of Oppression. It was an example. Yeah, thank you for the link. Yeah, it's an example of how you can build algorithms and not think that algorithms are related to DE&I, but they actually are and can affect people's lives.
We see a lot of that in private sector, and once it happens, I remember when Twitter did that random AI bot, and it turned into like a Miley Cyrus racist neo-Nazi weird bot when people started feeding data into it. But the government can't get away with that, can they? Right? So we can't like have these slips of D&I, embarrassments of technology, and that's something that I'm really passionate about as well. But yes, so for those of you who are on the call who are from the technology world, which I know many of you are, and the cloud and the databases and the cybersecurity world, D&I is no longer just this fluffy function of afterthought. It is going to be the measure, if Victor has his way, on how things and innovation gets evaluated altogether. So that's really exciting to see, just for the sake of the country. It says, Jaylene, do you want to ask your own question?
Yes, that was incredible. Like I just love what you said, and I've always thought that the CX and DEI pieces meld so well together because human-centered design really takes away a lot of the feelings, because you're not listening to loudest voice in the room. You design around hearing all the voices, and you just totally just amplified that and made it real. But my question for you is, I found that with CX and DEI, you run into this, like the leadership levels don't buy in. And I know that is like key to get some of these things forward. So I was curious to see what you've run into, because, NASA is the best place to work in the federal government, like, because you already, have you run into that? And is it because you have data that is just not an issue? Like what have you faced there?
Yeah, that's great question. And I think that's one of the reasons why I don't feel like it's me, like I can take credit. It's just, I'm in the best place for this than I have ever been. The other thing I'll say is that I'm not a CXO at the agency level. It's at a program. So I actually admit, or I wonder if it would be harder if we had an agency-wide chief experience officer, or that's working on customer experience. We're hoping that in the future, in a few years, we can get to that by this kind of experiment of me in this role, and a few others, that maybe this becomes more important, and then we give out our service to other parts of the agency. But right now we don't have that. So the question for me is, does my program, at my program level, inside my mission directorate, support it? And they luckily do. They are new to design, and they wanted to increase their design literacy, their data literacy, and they're like, teach us, we're open to learning, whatever you want to do. The only limits we have are maybe the budget that we have, but we can always advocate for more in future years. But with what we have, let's see what we can do. So they've been super open to that. The other thing is that I've been in situations where I worked at a company once, a small, it would be considered a small or medium-sized business, and we hired an external person to come in to do an equity audit. And the problem that we experience is that this person comes in to do the equity audit, and of course they find all these issues, because we had tons of issues, gender-based, race-based, etc. But to fix these issues, you actually have to make what I would call just organizational changes, strategic changes, management changes that don't seem like they are in the realm of the DE&I that she was hired to give advice on. So it's one of those things where, like, I just wish that instead of someone just being a DE&I thing, like, it was infused to just management consultants, so that when the company I was in, a company like that, hires a management consultant and then they give a recommendation that doesn't seem to relate in their mind to diversity, they don't fight it so much. But then they'll say, oh, wait a minute, why are you trying to get us to change our organizational structure? Or why I asked you to do D&I, because they don't see the connection between that and that it's fused into everything. Absolutely. So one of the things I think that'll push us, if you know, management consultants in general just infuse D&I into all of that they do, or people have a greater understanding that it affects everything. So I might give you recommendations about something that you don't understand to be related to diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, or justice. So, but anyway, at NASA, it's been great. Okay. Again, I'm at the program level. We're still advocating to get it to the agency level.
Thank you. It's helpful.
It is 1:02. I would love to go off record, stop recording, and just hang out.